Clark, Shenandoah, and Page. So happy to be with you all this evening, and glad this is working out. Sorry for the delay. A little bit about Virginia Cooperative Extension. Does anybody know anything about VCE, Virginia Cooperative Extension? Any familiarity with it? Yes, sir.
I do research at Blandy Farms.
Research at Blandy Farms. That's actually University of Virginia, but we have had, yeah, UVA is at Blandy. So Virginia Cooperative Extension is, the extension system is a nationwide system. It was actually set up in 1914, so well over 100 years ago now, through the land-grant university system. And the land-grant university system was actually set up by Lincoln in the 1860s. So our land grants in Virginia are Virginia Tech and Virginia State. We have two, being a southern state. In times of segregation, many of our southern states still have two land grants because of the traditional minority schools. So Virginia Tech and Virginia State make up the land grants that contribute to Virginia Cooperative Extension, and we are funded by all three levels of government, from the federal government through the USDA, through the state General Assembly, and then also by the local county governments. They contribute to us, they provide a space. We have an office just down the hall here in the Warren County Government Building. And the program areas and the mission is to get out the research-based information that's happening at the land-grant university, primarily in the ag community. That has been our historical work in and around farming and the rural landscapes of America. And that continues to change. In addition to ag programming, I primarily do horticulture. We have an agent here who does livestock, and another ag agent in Shenandoah who serves the same 5 counties that does crop and soil. We have family consumer sciences, so those individuals work with financial management, with health, nutrition, wellness, even childcare and housing programs. Karen Poff is located here in this building in Warren County. Vanessa Santiago is in my office in Frederick. Those two individuals serve our 5-county region here in the Northern Shenandoah Valley as well. And then all 4-H youth development programming runs through our offices. So we have a 4-H agent in each county office as well. And so that's just a quick down and dirty about some of the programming that we do through Virginia Cooperative Extension. I did bring a handout for those of you here in the room on our well water testing. That's a program we try to do every 1.5 to 2 years. We have that coming up in October. So if you're on a well or even a spring or a cistern and want to get your private water supply checked, we encourage you to do this. We test for 14 parameters, which is far more than the standard just local lab or required health department testing of E. coli and coliform bacteria and the pH. So typically you're only getting really 3 parameters. This is a $60 fee for quite a bit more. Typically, if that was done privately, you'd be looking at several $100s to do the level of testing that we offer through this program. Again, it's education-based. We give you information on maintenance of your well, maintenance to correct the measures. So feel free to join us at that if you have interest. And because my life has been turned upside down, I have to talk about this insect as well a little bit tonight, the spotted lanternfly. I provided handouts to those of you here, and I think Emily has passed along to those online the links that I had provided you before, right? The ones that traditionally are not, okay. Okay, so Emily's going to send it to those of you who are online that haven't gotten it yet. But spotted lanternfly is a new invasive insect pest we're dealing with in Winchester and Frederick County. Right now, the only known population of this in Virginia is in Winchester, Frederick County, and a few insects have been found on the western edge of Clark County, just across Opequon Creek. This insect is native to Asia. It arrived in North America for the first time, or was detected up in Berks County, Pennsylvania. That's Reading, Allentown area. And that was in 2014. It's a large plant hopper. Despite its name and despite its appearance, it's not a fly, it's not a butterfly, it's not a moth. It is a plant hopper. It's more closely related to aphids and cicadas and things like that. It's a piercing sucking insect. They're fairly large. We're in the adult life stage right now. They're nearly an inch long. When their wings are open, they can be 1.5 inches, 2 inches wide. And they are laying eggs right now as well. The egg masses are what will overwinter, survive through the winter into spring, hatch out in late April, early May, and provide our 21 population. But this is something we talk about wherever we go, just to raise awareness. Make sure you're aware of it. Keep your eyes out for this insect. I brought an extra Riker mount even to leave with you all as tree stewards. Just you can use yourselves or use when we're back out in the public a little bit more and actually presenting to the public. But please be on the lookout for this. If you see it in Warren County, let us know. Let Virginia Cooperative Extension, you can let me know directly, or the office here, or Department of Agriculture, Virginia Department of Agriculture. It's quite an invasive insect. It's a pest in many levels. It's a pest to agriculture. Primarily wine grapes is our concern with ag crops, also apples, peaches, cherries potentially. It's a forest pest because it likes things like walnut and maple, and it's a home landscape nuisance because it likes over 100 species and many of the ornamentals. And since they're a piercing sucking insect, they're drinking the sap out of the tree or whatever host plant they're on. They excrete a ton of waste, liquid, sugary syrup waste that we call honeydew, just like aphids, just like scale insects. Literally in a tree that has hundreds, if not thousands of these in it, it rains down out of the tree. When I'm surveying, I'm cleaning my glasses off all the time. It literally does rain down honeydew on you. So that coats everything, is a sticky mass, then sooty mold grows. So sooty mold is just a fungus growth that occurs on that. All that sugar also attracts ants and bees and wasps and hornets and butterflies. So it's not going to be a fun insect to deal with. If you haven't heard about it, get online and Google what Philadelphia and southeastern Pennsylvania have been dealing with since 2014. It's not going to be a fun one. So that said, let me jump into what we're really here to talk about. I actually have 2 chapters that I'm supposed to cover tonight, chapter 3 and chapter 6. But typically, I like to spend more time with chapter 6. I think it's a great chapter. It's a topic that's more hands-on, more applicable, and we can dive into that one a little better. So I'm going to do that one first and work through a presentation related to soils, water, and nutrition. So if we are talking about soils, water, and nutrition, what part of the tree are we talking about? The roots, the root system, exactly. So functions of tree roots are multifaceted, and I feel bad I'm standing right in front of you all. Anchorage, so holding the tree in place, the structural components of the tree holding it upright, the absorption and transport of minerals and nutrients, and water. Storage, it becomes a carbohydrate sink to store reserves, especially through the winter time or dry times if you're in a wet, dry climate. And then production of chemicals and hormones occur in the root system as well. So anchorage, again, the structural necessity to stand up, they have to withstand whatever environment they are faced with in the location where they're growing. So on a day like today that's wet and has been quite blustery at times, they have to withstand that. They have to withstand hurricanes if possible. So that all happens with the structural components of the root system. Also, the roots obviously are the water absorbing parts of the plant. Small absorbing roots are covered with fine root hairs that are actually microscopic. You can see that in the blow up on the screen. The food storage, as I was talking about, the root system becomes a carbohydrate sink where the extra sugars and carbohydrates are stored for growth, and especially in the spring, you're starting from nothing. That's coming from the trunk in the root system, all of that energy to grow out the plant. As I said, chemicals and hormones are manufactured in the root system when they're picking up the nutrients from the soil and then sending those throughout the entire plant. So here is, this is the major takeaway. If you get nothing else from this evening's talk, here is what I want you to understand. Have a good understanding of where the tree roots are located. And all too often in our urban landscapes, we end up with a lot of activity and construction and destruction to our trees. So here is a side view of a tree. What's a typical root system look like? What do you think of? What have you been taught? Where is the root system? "24 inches below the surface." You're good. Exactly, you're on this. A lot of textbooks, especially youth textbooks, basic science, will show a mirror image of the tree and its root system like this. That's completely incorrect. That's not what our tree root system looks like. That's what our tree root system looks like, exactly as you're describing. 24 inches deep or so. We'll get into the details of that. So again, there's the comparison, and that's usually quite a shocker to people. You know, back to that backhoe picture, and I've got a few more like that. When you have site excavation and construction work happening on a property, you're lucky to protect the trunk of a tree, but you want to protect the majority of that root system if at all possible. Here is, that fades out in the picture, but this is I don't know if that's a scarlet oak or a pin oak. I haven't been up to it to identify it exactly, but it's in a field that has been cultivated some, so I don't think it has its complete root system. But this was a picture I took a few years ago as the field was starting to dry out and the green grass was growing. You see this brown patch under the tree, exactly where the tree roots are. And you can see it's well beyond the drip line. But again, that one has been basically root pruned by cultivation in that field in the past. So to get to what Tricia was saying about where these tree roots actually are. So getting into, I don't know why that won't. I'm trying to get rid of this. All right, that's a little better. So you can still see it. So tree root depth, the goal is deep enough to avoid sunlight and stay moist, but shallow enough to absorb adequate oxygen. So that's what's driving root growth, where, how deep, how shallow it's actually growing. In your medium textured soils, the most fine non-woody tree roots, 90% in the top 6 inches. Again, staggering numbers for this. All right, this is not going to work now. I don't know why it wouldn't advance. Okay. So again, just a few photos. These are not great quality photos. This work was done by Dr. Bonnie Appleton, who's no longer with us. She was our ornamental tree and ornamental plant specialist at the Hampton Roads Ag Research and Extension Center. And she did a lot of work with ornamental trees and shrubs. And here you can see some photos. Even just a small tree, you can see how far out that root system is extending. Again, a root has been excavated with, I think, an air spade to pull it out and show you up to 3 to 5 times the distance that it's actually spreading. Again, another photo of Dr. Appleton's work. You've got this red maple with a root system going 60 plus feet in one direction, and it's only 30 feet tall, the tree itself. So when you drive through the yard, when you run construction equipment, when you install a new sewer line, whatever it may be, you're damaging that tree. It's just inevitable. Some of the types of roots, taproot, not all trees will have that. Typically the monocots or the conifer type trees are more apt to have taproots. Lateral roots are the standard branching ones. And from those lateral roots, you'll sometimes get sinker roots that supply extra support and anchoring the tree in place. And then the small absorbing roots are the root hairs and all of that are really doing the uptake of the water and nutrients. So to get into the nitty gritty a little bit more, factors influencing tree root growth: water, air, soil temperature, soil structure, soil pH, and nutrients. And when we talk about air, that's primarily going to be oxygen. That is really the driving component there. And I'm losing the top of that, but this is talking about why you end up with surface roots, or why roots occur above soil or at the surface. And it's a natural way for roots to grow, for some species especially. And I'll draw out a little bit for that just to show you. Compacted soil, again, you're driving the roots to the top. Low soil oxygen, again, roots are going to be at the surface. Soil erosion, and that's what's certainly occurring in that top right photo. On a steep slope, the soil has fallen away. Excessive mulch, again, over mulching, and we'll talk about that more at the end. Excessive mulching can cause adventitious root growth and soil level root growth. Physical objects going around concrete, rock breaks and things like that will drive roots to the surface as well. So just to draw for a second, if I've got a long enough cord. So let's pretend, and I don't know that the people online are going to see this, unfortunately. So you imagine we're looking at the soil line, and that's your grass. You've got a tree growing here somewhere, and we're looking at the tree root in the top 6 or 12 inches of soil. This one's going to be closer to the surface for this exercise. And just like you're familiar with the trunk and the branches putting on annual rings, tree roots do the exact same thing, right? So when that tree root is 3 inches below the soil surface as a young tree root, by the time it's 50, 60, 100 years old, what has happened to that tree root? It puts on annual rings every year, right? That's why you have surface roots most of the time. Does that make sense? So cutting those with a lawnmower is not a good thing. You know, digging them up, etc., covering them with 6 inches of soil is not a good thing. Ideally, you know, you would leave them alone or lightly mulch them. We'll talk about that a little bit more too. But that's an explanation as to why you end up with so many surface roots. And maples are notorious for that, and so are some other species. But I don't know why my advancer is not working. I have to walk to the computer to do that, sorry. Water absorption is a primary component of what tree roots are doing. They themselves are made up of 90% water, the trees along with the roots. Water is a solvent for water and nutrients and moving those nutrients around through translocation. Water is certainly part of the photosynthetic process. It's a major part needed for that chemical reaction. And water itself is what gives the cells its structure. That's why when plants wilt, they're lacking water, they fall over. It's because it needs that pressure from the water inside the cells to keep its shape. Some of the water extremes: too much, too little. That's the #1 reason plants die, at least for the questions I'm getting and the plant problems I typically get through my office are because it's too wet or too dry, especially with newly installed trees. The air, again, we're talking about oxygen primarily. Roots must have that oxygen from the air to actually respire. And they need that to absorb essential elements. It's critical. Oxygen is really the driving factor. And this slide helps show that too. So to have oxygen in the soil, you've got to have pore space. You've got to have the capacity for that soil to breathe so that the roots themselves can breathe. Bring in oxygen from the air, releasing carbon dioxide. This is respiration. This is not photosynthesis. So that has to be able to get out of the soil. Here, again, I keep saying and I keep repeating it, but oxygen is the driving factor for where you're going to find tree roots. And not only the tree roots, but as is mentioned here, your soil microorganisms. We'll look at some soil health stuff, but it's the biology of the soil that makes it a good soil. 25% oxygen, your roots are growing well. When you get down 10% or so, you're going to start seeing decline and issues. At 5%, your roots are going to completely stop growing. At 2%, they're going to decline and die. Some common reasons that cause oxygen depletion or poor access to oxygen in our soil: compaction, oftentimes by construction, building the initial site to begin with, bringing in fill soil. That tree, again, they've protected the trunk, right? It should be fine, but you've covered the root system with 3 feet of soil. No longer has oxygen. Saturation through too much moisture, again, not going to have adequate oxygen. That said, some of our species do well in riparian areas, right? Saturated soils. Bald cypress live in swamps. What are some other species that do well in saturated soils or riparian areas? Any comments or thoughts? Willows, they do. River birch, maples, red maples will often grow down. Even ash, when we had ash, will grow down along streams and riverbanks. Sycamores, those species. A lot of those species that we just named that you think of in riparian areas are often street trees. Red maples, sycamores or London planes, red maples, ash. Why is that? They can tolerate the low oxygen situation of wet feet, so they can tolerate the low oxygen situation of compacted soils in the typical urban setting. All right, looking at ideal soils. Here's a pie chart to show what our ideal soil would be made up of. 45% mineral. Really, it's 50% solids, 50% pore space. So 50% mineral and organic, 50% air and water. Again, that's going to be your natural forest, undisturbed soil. The reality of what most of us are dealing with in our home landscape is something more like this. It's been severely compacted. You're at 90% soil solids and only 10% pore space. So a little discussion about the components of soil and what makes up the soil structure itself. Sand, silt, and clay are our primary components of soil. And that's really just a classification of size, is what that is. Stone and gravel are your larger pieces. We're not even really going to consider them typically in most discussions of soil structure. You're looking at the percentage of sand, silt, and clay. What's an ideal soil called that has a good makeup of sand, silt, and clay? Anybody know? Loam. You're typically looking for a loamy soil, which has a pretty good ratio of all three of those. Heavy sandy soils, they're big soil particles. They're going to have lots of pore space, right? So with lots of pore space, they're going to dry out quickly. It can leach out, it can run out, even horizontally. Your clay is the smallest part. That's what we have a lot of. And just for size comparison, if we're talking soil particles, this isn't even a full-size basketball, but a basketball is your sand particle. The ping pong ball is your silt particle. A pinhead is your clay particle. So that's giving you perspective of the soil sizes. And as is shown on this slide, clay is rarely, silt too can often be angular and horizontal rather than a true small or kind of globular type structure. Kind of a lot of our smooth, slick soils with clay in it, that's why, is because you've got these horizontal structures that really make up the clay particles. So here's, what did I hit? That is working now. It wasn't working before, now it is. The advancer, that's good. All right, here's a good healthy soil. You're gonna see a leaf litter or an O horizon at the top, organic matter breaking down. Your A is your topsoil. E is where you're joining into your topsoil and organic matter with the substrate. Your subsoil is B, and C is where you're getting into more bedrock and broken bedrock, and R is rock, R for rock, your bedrock. So creating a healthy soil, once you've destroyed it, or once you have compacted soil, what can you do to remedy the situation? How do you change the soil structure, or the texture really? Adding sand or other aggregate. That is one way. That's often advised, but this is the reality of that advice. For a soil to actually improve its drainage situation, it must be at least 70% sand. So you're adding a ton of sand before you actually get any benefit from adding that sand. So think about that. You've got a bunch of pinhead and ping pong ball sized soil particles, and you're throwing some basketballs into that. What happens? Those fill in all the pore space around the basketball, right? So you're not gaining any pore space until you have the majority sand. And that's why you're unfortunately just typically wasting your money by adding sand, because you have to add so much, it's almost not worth it. So some other ways to do it. Cultivation. That too can damage the soil structure, but it can break it up and get it started. The really good one is to add organic matter, bringing in compost. It brings in nutrients. It helps with the organic matter provides really a place for other organisms to live, to break down those nutrients, and bringing that life back to the soil is what will restore your soil structure. So what time are we going to take a break? We can stop now, or we can do. You guys okay? Speak up if you need a break, but we're going to keep going just since we got a late start. So I'm going to show a short video. I thought. Here we go. And I may have to hold the mic so the folks online can hear. Please continue. I wonder if it has to do with the screen sharing. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to skip it because we'll have to share this link later. It's not gonna work right now through Zoom. It won't let my audio work. So we'll continue. Just a little description about what this is. So Gaining Ground is a short video production that USDA, NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Services, put together a few years ago now to encourage farmers about no-till practices. And it does a great job talking about soil properties, soil health, and again, this is the ag setting, not really applicable to most of us in this room in the, the tree world, the urban forest world. You're not tilling up the soil like you do in a monoculture ag setting. But to relate it a little bit, what do we do on a construction site that becomes a residential property, that becomes a retail center or a school or whatever? You're tilling up that soil. So that's how it's applicable. And this again is similar to what they describe on the video. Chris Lawrence is the same guy in the video. This was a farm workshop that we did a few years ago. And Chris takes soil from different locations and puts it through a rainfall simulator is what they have. And it shows you what happens to the soil in that situation. And so in this picture that we're showing right now, on the left, closest to the guy with the blue shirt, is tilled soil. So what he has put in those trays is about 2 or 3 inches, a cutout, basically like bringing up a slab of sod from that location where he harvested each scenario. So the first one to the left is tilled. The next one, number 2, is a no-till situation. So that's an ag field that has been in no-till for multiple years, where they have just planted into the existing cover crop after it's been frosted or killed with herbicides or whatever measure was used, or right after harvest sometimes, that gets replanted without tillage or plowing. The center scenario in this photo was a tray from the forest setting, a natural forest. The fourth one was a heavy trafficked pasture. Again, that's an ag scenario, but we could use that heavy trafficked pasture for a heavy trafficked lawn. It would be similar. On the right is a rotational graze situation where the livestock are moved around more methodically and intentionally so that the grasses can recover and rebuild the soil and rebuild themselves. So that, again, in the urban scenario would be us mowing at an appropriate height or letting plants grow up in certain scenarios where possible. And so you can see the wand that's overhead. It sprays down water, and he runs that long enough to simulate a heavy rainstorm, applying about 1 inch of water over the period of like 15 minutes is what this simulates. And you see in the front jars, that's runoff. So that's what's coming out of these soil situations. The first one, which has been tilled, you're getting a lot of water. The fourth one, which is the compacted pasture or compacted lawn, is getting a lot of water, and both of those are muddy. So you're losing your soil resource in those situations. It doesn't show up so well in this picture, but if you look under the table, you can see at especially 3 and 5, they're really full. There is soil in that. Those are muddy because it's just been disturbed from him bringing it into this simulator situation. But those are the ones that harvested tons of water. One almost has no water under the table. It all ran off. And in the video that I was going to show you, and you can get the link to, I've already provided that to Emily. She can send that out to everybody. He flips this pan out of the simulator onto the ground. And so after 15 minutes of getting 1 inch of water, what do you think the bottom of that pan looks like? Just 2-3 inches down. It's dust, bone dry. So you're harvesting none of that water resource. You've lost soil resource. So they just do a really good job of talking about soil properties and the management techniques that we do, both in the ag setting, and then I'm doing a bit of a leap to apply it to the urban setting, but it's the same situation. Again, this is the reality of our urban soils, and this is what happens. Unfortunately, all 4 of those photos that I'm showing now are situations in Blacksburg on Virginia Tech's campus. Again, most people think if you don't hit the trunk of the tree's okay. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. You don't want to damage the trunk, but you don't want to damage the root system either. Again, this is the ideal soil profile we're after. And a recap of showing you the root systems, where they really are. This is what people think. That's what they really are. And you have to be aware of that when you're doing work. Explain that to your contractors, explain that if it's your property, if you're working as a manager for a property, explain that to the people doing the work. And it's going to cost you more money if you're bidding out a project. If you're asking for root protection and saving tree root zones, it's going to cost you extra money. Don't go for the bottom dollar bidder. This is just to show a typical development years ago. You would often leave the forest and work with the topography of the landscape. Unfortunately today, this is the more typical scenario, is to just level everything off and pack as much square footage in structures as possible to optimize the dollar of each acre, but that's the reality of it. And then we end up with completely turned over soils. Nothing is natural about that. It's compacted very heavily for the roads and structures. You want that. You want that for your road. You want that for your house. You don't want it settling. You don't want it, you know, moving over time or with earthquakes and water. So to go back to this scenario, the only benefit I can think of to this situation is when you would build neighborhoods like this, you would have slow tree death over the period of 5 to 10 years a lot of times that got damaged. And so even still today, if I get calls from someone who is talking about their tree declining or dying, I'm asking, what's the age of the subdivision, or when was the house built? Have you had any construction done in the last 5 or 10 years? I mean, those are all questions to understand what may have happened in the life of a tree that you're seeing effects from today. These are some options for remedy or to minimize damage. Heavy mulching can offer a cushion when you're bringing construction equipment in and out. Same with those rubber pads, or they will even use timber sometimes to run on to protect the soil, and then that gets removed after the fact. Grass paved scenarios or stone pavers that are porous are sometimes used for roadways, and I don't know that really you know, changes the situation, but it gives you a defined place to compact and protect the soil underneath where roots can still grow. And then the bottom right photo is that air spade where they're excavating out from the tree trunk. They'll probably come back and put in compost just to help alleviate compacted soils. In heavy urban settings, sometimes structural soils are used, root trenches and some other drainage devices to connect tree pits to planting areas across a sidewalk or under paved areas. And it's all about giving that tree root zone some more space. As you can see here on the bottom graphic, it's even got drainage under it, but you've got space for that tree to actually grow and expand beyond the 2x2 or 4x4 planting pit and really seek out growth underneath the sidewalks or even pavement sometimes. So looking at the nutrient aspect of what tree roots are pulling up and eating, and really the tree or plant itself, for the most part, we really don't need to fertilize many trees. If you've got a healthy soil situation, they're gonna find the resources they need. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium are macronutrients. Those are the ones that are needed in greatest quantity. Those are the ones you'll typically get info on in a soil analysis. And speaking of soil analysis, I've given you some information at your tables about soil testing for a soil analysis. The multi-page white sheet are instructions on how to conduct a soil sample. for the home garden, home landscape. It talks about the scenario and depth you want for lawns or a vegetable or flower bed or trees or shrubs. Taking a composite sample so that you're doing a randomized sampling of your yard or the tree roots growth area that you're testing, mixing that together and then sending that in to the lab for analysis. You don't want to pick up soil. I even brought a soil probe. You can use a soil probe like this. You can use a shovel. You can use a trowel. If you have to do a lot, something like this comes in really handy. It just does a core, sort of like a core aerator, but it just pulls a single core out of the soil, and then you can put that into a bucket and mix it with your other composite samples and put it into the box. I've given you the box, and the green form is the form that goes along. If you want to go through that process through the Virginia Tech Soils Lab, this is their info. You can do that locally through Southern States and some others. Sorry, had to take a water break for those of you on Zoom. So soil testing, that's a good place to start. It's good baseline information to understand. I'm not giving it to you to do through the Virginia Tech Lab. Feel free to if you want. It's about the same price if you do it at Southern States or even other private labs around the area. But the blue form gives you some scenarios. Those are the reports that you'll get back. Some examples. Understanding your pH, and we're going to talk about that. Knowing where your macronutrients are and some of the other micronutrients, what you may be lacking, can help you make management decisions. And that's why it's often good to get that base understanding. I doubt we have time to really get into this, but you can look through those. One of the examples I provided, I think it's the fourth one, they tested for organic matter, gives you a 2.5% organic matter. That's actually a pretty good organic matter. You're going to see it maybe 2 to 4 or 5%, especially maybe in a vegetable garden, you'll get up to 4 or 5%. So the other macronutrients, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium. Your hydrogen and oxygen and your carbon you're getting out of air and water. Your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium typically coming from the soil. And then the micronutrients, they're not micro because they're not important. They're micro because they're needed in small quantities. The full listing there. And soil pH. So the soil pH is a measure of hydrogen ions. Acidic soils are going to be low pH, below 7. Your high pH soils are basic or alkaline, above 7, and 7 is neutral. So for most of our plant material, you're looking 6.5 is a good target. That one's giving you a bit of a bigger range even. Obviously, there's some outliers out there like blueberries and azaleas and hollies that want a more acidic soil. And what the pH drives really is the availability of nutrients. And so what this chart is showing you is At the extremes of very acidic and very alkaline, nitrogen is not available for uptake. It's maybe bound too tightly to the soil. Same with iron deficiency. We see that often in willow and pin oaks. In our limestone soils, where we have a high alkaline soil, we end up with iron deficiency, yellow chlorotic leaves, because iron's not available for uptake. It may be there, it's just bound too tightly that the tree doesn't have access to it. This is just a graphic showing pH, really acid rain from nearly 20 years ago. And fortunately, this has really improved over the last 2 decades. But I still run into lots of people who say, you know, you need to lime your soil every year just because. No, not necessarily. Get a soil test, know what you actually need to do. But people got ingrained to, because we had so much acid rain in the east, you know, that's showing our rain typically of 4.5 acid level. So that's pretty acidic. We were constantly driving our soils down into the acid range. So we needed to keep liming and bringing them back up. It's improved because a lot of the industry in Detroit, Pittsburgh, that was creating the air pollution have cleaned up. Much better filters, much better, there's just less air pollution, which was creating the acid rain. Fertilizing trees and shrubs, determined by age and species. Typically your mature trees, maybe once every 3 to 5 years, but they really don't need that much in the scheme of things. Now, that scenario is going to change. If you're in a situation where you can leave the organic matter, where you can leave the leaves, where you're mulching well, you're bringing in nutrients to that tree. If there's no mulch there, if it's all grass underneath, you're bagging your grass, you're removing the leaves, you're not returning anything to the soil. It's going to need more nutrients. Young trees, you may want to fertilize more often to get them established. Not necessarily the concentrated spikes and tablets and things like that. You know, a broadcast application is often better. That way you're getting to all those absorbing roots. You're only putting a little bit down. You're not putting a concentrated amount in one spot here, there, and around the tree. As I was talking a little bit about the scenario under a tree, here we are showing root competition. So not only if you have lawn under a tree, and you have the issue of taking away the nutrients, if you're bagging the grass or bagging and removing leaves, you have competition with the roots, the tree roots and the grass roots. From a horticultural standpoint, the bottom right is ideal. You want to mulch and have nothing. Mulch at least to the drip line would be the goal. Unfortunately, our aesthetic eye does not like that very well. We want multi-level. You want the specimen tree. You want some mid-level shrubs or small trees. You want your perennial, herbaceous perennials, ground covers, etc. But ultimately, that's all competition to your specimen tree. So getting into mulching and maybe some scenarios, not what of what not to do. The tree shown in this diagram, again, one of Bonnie Appleton's examples, the tree was either planted too high, probably in the nursery scenario, if it was field grown, or it was planted too low, sorry, too deep. And or the same scenario will happen if you mulch really deep. You sometimes get adventitious roots that come out. The crown of this tree should have been down here at this first set of roots, and it ended up growing more up top. The goal of mulching is to moderate the soil temperature, keep it cool in the summer, keep it from freezing and heaving, and freeze and thaw in the winter, just to stabilize that temperature a little bit. Help prevent erosion, hold the soil in place, reduce soil compaction. Even just the decomposition of organic matter helps with that compaction, breaking it down. It holds off the growth of weeds and grass that would compete with the tree itself. It's holding the moisture in place for the tree to use, and even some mechanical protection from your mower or string trimmer. So a few scenarios again. On the left, anybody know what has happened there? That tree is dead. Weed eater damage. Exactly. That is what happened to that one. So mulching can be a good thing just for that protection, but don't overdo it. We're certainly overdoing it there on the photo on the right. Definitely overdoing it there. This is a commercial example I see all too often. Typically, our commercial, the owners of commercial properties will bid out their landscape maintenance, and in that bid, they're asking for remulching every year, at least once a year, maybe twice a year. And when it gets remulched, you typically edge around everything to get a nice, clean, crisp edge. Looks good aesthetically, but what happens is the soil and debris from when you cut that edge gets thrown back up into the center of that tree mound, which is becoming a tree mound. It should just be a circle of mulch around the base of a tree. It just keeps getting added and added and added because it's more expensive to remove it and take it away. So that's something to educate the property owners on, is, you know, think about that. If you're looking for bottom dollar, this is what you're going to get. If you don't write that into your specs, if you don't ask your landscape contractor or maintenance guy to remove those spoils, this is what you're going to get, and it's not healthy for the tree. Getting even worse and even worse. Yeah, so a little mulch is good, so a lot must be even better, right? I don't know. So just real quick, the proper mulching, 2 to 3 inches of mulch, ideally, again, out to the drip line if possible. You know, for a large, mature 300-year-old white oak, that's a significant drip line that you're going to be mulching under. Don't mound up against the trunk. You want to keep it away. You want to be able to see the crown of that tree and see the root flare. Whoop. Some results of over mulching. You get adventitious root growth, like that picture I showed earlier. Unfortunately, this is what typically happens. Those were all branching back out, kind of perpendicular to the tree trunk. Typically, with over mulching, you end up with girdling roots. You get roots that are growing around the tree. And that's fine for a little bit, but again, remember, just as I was showing the tree rings of the root system, and as that trunk grows year after year, in 5, 10, 15 years, the trunk has grown, the roots have grown in diameter. Now there's no place for that tree trunk to actually grow. And it squeezes off the flow of the vascular system of the tree. The results, again, it can take 3 to 5 years. It can take 5, 10, 15 years, honestly. You'll see off-color leaves, abnormally small leaves, potentially, any or all of these. Poor twig growth, dieback of older branches, rotting, peeling bark, and you may even see the girdling roots themselves. Here's another good example of girdling roots. Those are fine now for a few years, but as those roots grow in diameter, as the tree trunk grows in diameter, you're going to end up with issues. You can see the root flare of that tree well, but that was actually an old white pine, and the needles had collected underneath. And when you raked them away, you could see how a root had grown through the needles at one time over that tree, major tree root. So we went around and cut those just to relieve it. There were some others that had actually grafted in. Again, more examples of over mulching, planting too deep, pot bound when that was in a container in the nursery in the bottom left. Same with the top right was a container. And that's it for chapter 6. So let's pause there, see if there are any questions on Zoom or here in the room. Anything popping up? I'm trying to go back. So an example like this. So the question is, for an example like this, what would the recommendation be? And yeah, it would be to actually cut those roots. Yes. You in this example, you would probably, you've got several years before that's going to create a true issue. I would probably do one this year and one next year so that you're not doing both at the same time. Again, it depends on what level of maintenance and ability you have. If you know you're never going to get back to it, or it's going to get covered over and you're never going to find those roots again, I'd cut them both now. You're better off cutting them than leaving them, because that once the trunk of the tree gets to those roots, it's done. It's not going to thrive. The question is, can calcium be used to reduce compaction? It does have some benefits, but the greatest benefit you're going to get is by applying organic matter. Is there a follow-up? Anybody else? So I think I do have a little bit of time. I wanted to look at those, at the soil test, the results. So those of you in the room, that's your blue form. There should be 2 sheets stapled together. The main thing to look at when you get that report back, the first thing I go to is the pH. And I think it makes sense why that would be, but pH is driving your availability of all the other nutrients. So in the first example that I've got here, we've got a soil pH of 8. 7 is neutral, right? So 8's going to be pretty alkaline. The crop, if you notice that below the chart, the crop is rhododendron. So that's going to be an acid-loving shrub. A pH of 8 is not going to be is not that desirable for a rhododendron. The middle bar of numbers gives you your P, K, your phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, zinc, manganese, copper, iron, and boron. It's going to give you a number. I rarely, again, just for quick analysis, don't pay attention to all those numbers. This one's organized. If you do it through the Virginia Tech Lab, they give you a low, medium, high, very high. They're basically telling you where you are. That's all you have to look at. And then for the micronutrients, sufficient, insufficient. Cation exchange, the CEC, can help give you some additional information, but really looking at the pH and your low, medium, high, very high, sufficient is at quick glance going to give you a lot of information as to the baseline of your soils of wherever you're testing. So for this specific example, obviously no lime is going to be needed because lime is what would be added to raise the soil pH. We're actually trying to drive it down to be more acidic. So its recommendation, the 630 is sulfur. And then you would see additional notes. The 261 recommendation is your fertilizer recommendation for rhododendron. Acid-loving plants would be found there. It's not printed on that actual sheet. If you look at the next one that we've got, the crop is shrubs and non-acid loving plants. We've got a soil pH of what? 7.3. So that's just above neutral. Not terrible. We're getting a little bit high, honestly. But our lime recommendation is nothing. They're not recommending sulfur to drive it down because we're not really looking for something for blueberries or azaleas. You can see the very high. Go ahead, Emily.
She said, so I recently had an ash tree beside my driveway retreated to prevent infestation of emerald ash borer. One side of the tree's crown had been completely covered over up to about 8 inches. The other side was clear. The person who treated the tree left an area beside the driveway open rather than returning the soil to where he had dug out. So to shield the tree from damage from freezing, should I apply leaf mulch or local tree mulch from our community pile? Mulch has not been heated to kill termites.
So, yeah. So Emily's been reading me the question in the chat about an ash tree, and it was retreated for ash borer, but when that treatment occurred, one side of the tree had excessive soil or mulch on it that was removed to make the application, and that soil was left off by the arborist or whoever made the application. And the question is what to do, whether that should be covered back over or mulch should be added, or the municipal mulch and chips could be used. And it's hard to say without seeing it. So ideally, I'd love to see a picture and talk through it more one-on-one with with the participant who's asking, but just off the cuff, what I'm picturing and seeing, I would say leave it exposed. You don't want that excess soil and mulch up against the root flare. You don't want it up against the trunk of the tree. Not only are you, reducing the oxygen level that is able to get to that part of the plant right there, you're holding excessive moisture to a spot that doesn't want to be wet against that root flare and the base of the trunk. That then can harbor and make a place for diseases and insects to actually get in. And as far as the mulch sources, if you were to mulch, I think the question with the municipal mulch, the point was noted that it hadn't been heated and treated for termites. Now that in and of themselves is not that big of a deal. Termites are not the big concern there. If you've got a healthy tree, it's not going to have termite infestation. We've all got termites all around where we live. We need termites in the forest. They're helping break down all the dead trees that fall and land. So, yeah, we don't want termites destroying our houses, and there's remedies and there are maintenance practices that you can do to minimize them from coming into the structure. But termites themselves being present on your property is not really the concern. The concern with the municipal mulch could be you don't know what they're collecting to make that mulch or to make those chips. You don't know what the trees may have been treated with, what herbicides may be in there, if they're collecting leaves. A lot of times you're picking up dirt and debris in the streets, salt. Sound is off. We have a few people on Zoom. Can you all hear me? Can you enter in the chat or unmute yourselves? Someone said they can. Some are saying yes, some are saying no. She may have audio issue on her end. I heard from one person who can hear me. Rick can hear. Well, all I know to do is keep going. What's her name? Rhea, can you hear? Well, hopefully we have a video she can go back and watch. All right, so I think that answered the question she was asking anyhow. The other examples there, one for trees, not going to go into depth here. The last one was apples. Again, I threw that one in because they had tested for the organic matter. But this is just, again, it's a really inexpensive way in the scheme of things to get kind of baseline information. It's like you going to the doctor and getting an annual checkup. It's just kind of getting an overview and understanding what might be right, what might be wrong. Maybe all is right and nothing's needed, but now you know. And it just gives you good information for management decisions as you go forward. So there's all my contact information, and that really finishes up chapter 6. Chapter 3, we've just got like 15 minutes or so to go through, and I don't have a formal presentation for that, but just wanted to talk through that chapter a little bit. I've given you some additional handouts actually from Colorado Master Gardener Program that gives you more information on hormones and the chemicals that are happening in the plants, and then also the physiology piece of photosynthesis, respiration, and transpiration, just as some additional reading material. And again, I provided those links to Emily, who will get out to those of you via Zoom as well, or via email for those of you on Zoom. But photosynthesis, again, chapter 3 is very important. It's just not as applicable as the whole soil roots chapter. And that's why I like to, when I present, I typically spend the majority of the time on that. Photosynthesis is just as applicable and just as necessary, but it's not an aspect that we're changing and modifying and managing typically. These are functions of the plant that are happening, whether we're there or not. So photosynthesis, you know, that's the carbon cycle, the basis of the carbon cycle, pulling CO2 and water together with light energy through chlorophyll, and you're making glucose and oxygen. And really the ability for us to have food and air to breathe as mammals. It talks there in the beginning of that a little bit about acclimation, or really in the box, the did you know in chapter 3. If you guys have that in front of you, I don't know if you do, or some of you may or not, but it's talking about how the tree leaves, as you come down the tree, they're usually smallest at the top and larger at the bottom. Why is that? That's a good theory. What was your answer, Daniel? To absorb the same amount of light. Yeah. So a leaf, to get good light at the bottom of the tree in nearly full shade, is gonna need to be more surface area. So oftentimes they will broaden out. You'll see that with your house plants. If any of you move them in and out, or you know, you just kind of have to acclimate them. They will have smaller leaves when they're out in the sun, and you bring them in for the winter, and they just broaden out, and you will see them grow wider leaves actually. Respiration is talked about. We talked about that even when we were talking about tree roots, respiring really the consumption of food and release of carbon dioxide. The second page of chapter 3, they talk a little bit about that energy reserve, which we were talking about, roots being a sink for carbohydrate reserve. That's a source for the spring flush. That's also a carbohydrate source for repeated flush if needed, if the tree is defoliated for some reason, whether it defoliates from being dry, whether it defoliates from an insect infestation or a disease, you know, like a foliar disease that defoliates the tree. They will oftentimes reflush. And most established trees can handle that 1, maybe 2 times, but repeated annually, repeated multiple times in a season, you end up using up their carbohydrate reserve that's stored in the tree, and you end up with issues. Transpiration, the process of water vapor moving through the plant. And I oftentimes, if we have time and the ability, which we don't tonight, love to actually bring in a leaf. I usually bring in a philodendron leaf, a house plant, and put it under a microscope, and they have really good stomata, the holes that are on the underside of the leaves. You can actually see the holes. You can see the guard cells that form around that stomata that actually open and close it. It's pretty cool to actually see that and understand how the plant itself is actually breathing. Wanted to skip a page there and go to the growth factors, and I'm thinking we're getting close on time. The growth factors, really looking at excurrent shape and decurrent shape of trees. The apical dominance is really, that's a hormone-driven response. The terminal growth, the terminal leader of any shoot, whether that's the main stem or a lateral, it too has a terminal. Even roots, they have terminals. There is a hormone called auxin, which is driving that main central leader growth. That auxin suppresses the buds below it from breaking out or growing significantly. And so you end up with that excurrent shape when you have strong apical dominance. What are some examples of tree species that have excurrent shapes? Naturally growing that way. Cypress, yeah, most of your conifers. Yep. Can you think of, so for those of you who don't have it in front of you, the excurrent shape is really kind of like an A-shape formation, like a Christmas tree. Can you think of any of our deciduous trees that will hold that sort of shape?
4 minutes till the debate.
Pin oak, yep. Some of our lindens will do that. The little leaf linden, tulip poplar even, hollies, another evergreen. That decurrent shape, more of a spreading, broad, oval growth habit or circular growth habit. What comes to mind with those?
Oaks.
Oaks, maple, yeah. Sycamores. Yeah, so somebody online said oaks, and I don't know if we said it earlier, I think in the room for excurrent, pin oak was excurrent. So a lot of our other oak species, especially our white oaks, that's the one that comes to mind for me. A grand white oak that's several hundred years old really has that decurrent shape. Can be wider than it is tall easily. A cool thing to we talked about auxins a little bit. Gravitropism, that's kind of a cool term. Not many of you are going to use it, but that is really stimulus to light, and plants will grow to or away from it sometimes, rarely away, but typically to. And then gravitropism is gravity-related growth. And if anybody's been in the floral industry, you can think of a species that responds to this all the time. Anybody have any work with flowers, cut flowers? Snapdragons are the ones. If you cut a snapdragon and lay it down for a very short period of time, the tip will immediately grow straight up. And so you have to store those vertical, like in a bucket of water or in a vase. Just an example of that term. The phototropism, bending to light, growing to light. Another flower example for that one. Anybody have a guess? Moonflower. That's the one. Somebody online said sunflower. That was the one I was thinking of. If you watch a sunflower, it will follow the sun every day, back and forth. How long do trees live? That's a good one. Did you know? Weak wood is often associated with fast-growing trees, such as silver maple and ailanthus. Such trees are more susceptible to storm damage and may become hazards when planted near homes. That's a good rule of thumb, and that's something that I run across all the time when people are looking for species advice, for landscape design, for info about plants in general. They always want something that's fast growing, low maintenance. They want the instant shade. They want the instant hedge. And what do? We plant red maples everywhere. We plant Leyland cypresses everywhere for our hedges. And what did that box just say? Weak wood is often associated with fast growing trees. And we keep setting ourselves up for these problems. Those in and of themselves, not to bash a Leyland cypress or a red maple, they can be beautiful if properly grown and maintained, but we just keep overplanting certain species in almost a monoculture setting, and that just sets us up for collapse when a new disease or insect comes in, or we have a bad storm. Trees of heaven, yeah, the ailanthus. So spotted lanternfly, they love tree of heaven. They actually love red and silver maples, especially in the fall, this time right now. So on that, I think I'm going to end. And if there are additional questions, you guys shoot them away. Yes, sir.
Just a quick one. I missed what you said about if a tree generates its
Photosynthesis.
is too efficient compared to the consumption.
If photosynthesis is too efficient, that's all right. Yeah. Just send it to me and we'll discuss it further. Other questions online? Nobody's typing in or answering. Well, thank you all. Sorry for all the audio and video difficulties today.
Thank you, Mark. Oh.